If animals eat other animals, do you believe that nature is violent and immoral?
When we look at how we should live as humans that have the ability to choose to live in very different ways than we lived ancestrally, sometimes we look to nature for models, and it's important to understand which models are relevant and which ones aren't relevant, right? And so in the animal kingdom, we see predatory cycles. We see predation and some animals eating plants and some animals eating other animals, and we see that's actually part of the balance of the whole system, right? That the animals that are eating plants actually don't regulate their own consumption and they don't regulate their own reproduction, so they would breed themselves beyond the carrying capacity of their environment, and the process of prey checking them is actually what creates a dynamic balance, right? And so when many look at that, they say, hey, survival of the fittest is what drives evolution, and it's part of what drives balance, and it's a part of nature, and that we're part of the food chain. We're animals, we're part of the biosphere, and that we should embrace being part of that. And there's a couple distinctions that are really key, I think, to note here. One is kind of a really subtle scientific and philosophic point, is that the reason there's predation in nature, the reason there's a predatory process, and it is violent, right? And any animal that is on the prey side of the equation will acknowledge that really clearly, is because the prey animals can't self-regulate sustainably because they don't have the cognitive capacities, the neurophysiologic capacities to be able to assess what the carrying capacity of their environment is, and then say, hey, we're going to stop reproducing now, or we're going to slow reproduction rates, we're going to slow our consumption rates to actually live sustainably. And so when they start to outbreed their own environmental capacities, and there starts to be a scarcity of resource for the creatures, some of the creatures start to actually prey on each other because there isn't enough of the base materials anymore, and there's too many of them. They go into competition as a function of that scarcity, as a function of their inability to modulate their own sustainability, and then those ones have an evolutionary niche where they evolve in the direction of predatory kind of animals. So the predatory process arises out of the unsustainability of or the incapacity of a species to be self-sustaining. So that violence is actually necessary for the species to continue, right, and for the biosphere to continue. And so it's not like it's just a good thing, it's a necessary thing, right? And in nature it is a necessary thing. With humans, there's this fascinating thing that evolution drives more complexity, more complex ability to respond. And so we see from reptilian nervous system that's kind of on-off modulated responses that experience physiologic pain and pleasure in those response capacities, to mammalian nervous systems and their ability for emotion, to neocortex primates and dolphins, porpoises, etc., and their capacity for cognition, to then with humans and the prefrontal cortex and the capacity for abstraction. We're the first creature that has this abstraction capacity. We can actually assess our environment's carrying capacity. We don't do a good job of this yet, but we could assess, hey, how many of us could really fit here based on the resource per capita needs? And then we could modulate the efficiency of how we consume and actually modulate our own reproduction to stay within those carrying capacity limits so that we didn't need ongoing violence to check our numbers. Now, this is a capacity we have neurophysiologically because of our prefrontal cortex and uniquely human capacities, but it's not one we've exercised well yet. We're still breeding irrespective of the resource limits of the planet, and we're still consuming irrespective of the unsustainable resource limits of the planet, and as a result some humans start preying on other humans in different ways, right, through all kinds of pathological competition. It's an important note, though, that we don't have to do this, right, and that we're actually at the point right now where, because of our data harvesting capacities and really our ability to assess planetarily things that we couldn't even a few generations ago because of our technological capacities, that we really are, for the first time, capable of saying how many people can the Earth support sustainably in harmony with the rest of the biosphere, and how do we consciously self-regulate as a whole species how we relate to the planet sustainably, where there's no need for a predation process continuing. And what's so exciting about that to me is that we're the first species that really has the capacity to end the need for violence. And to really step up to that capacity is such an exciting thing.